Have you ever felt called towards something, but also been completely terrified to do it? Hey there, happy homebirthers, and welcome to episode 334 of the Happy Homebirth podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and today I'm joined by Ally Roberson, a wife, mother of two, homesteader, and creator documenting her family's journey toward a more intentional life in rural Georgia. When Allie became pregnant with her second baby, she found herself pulled toward home birth. But there was one major obstacle standing in the way: fear. My friends, today's episode is for the woman who wonders if she is actually strong enough. The woman who loves the idea of physiological birth, but in the back of her mind thinks that might work for other women, but not for me. Let's jump into Allie's story. Please remember that the opinions of my guests may not necessarily reflect my own, and vice versa. And this show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Allie, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I am so excited. I cannot wait to dig into your story. Would you mind taking a moment here just at the beginning to introduce yourself and your family to the listeners?
Absolutely. So, my name is Ally Roberson. I live here in West Georgia with my family, which is my husband and our two children now. My oldest is 2.5, and my youngest is just 2 months old. We actually have a YouTube channel where I'm documenting everything homesteading, home birth, just this life here in the country that we are building. We've got chickens and pigs, a huge garden. I'm learning how to can, and basically just questioning the norm. And I think with questioning where your food comes from, naturally you kind of go down that pipeline of questioning just the modern medical industrial complex and big pharma. And that is definitely what led me to home birth.
Wow. I can't wait to hear how that journey has actually unfolded. What's the name of your YouTube channel?
So it's just a self-titled YouTube channel. So if you just search Ally Roberson, I will pop up. I make new videos every Wednesday, and
Nice.
it's just so much fun.
Awesome. That is so exciting. I cannot wait to link that in the show notes for people to check out. And let's talk about, okay, so this is where you are now. This sense of questioning everything and obviously giving birth at home. But with your first, I'm curious to hear when you became pregnant for the first time, what was that like? What were you thinking in terms of how you would give birth?
Yeah, so I have always just been so interested in pregnancy, everything birth related. In the beginning, it wasn't necessarily home birth. It was just a fascination with babies and pregnancy and birth. And when I got pregnant with my first baby, we were very much just living in the suburbs, just your typical couple, eagerly awaiting the birth of their first child. And like I said, I was interested in home birth, but I just felt like so many other women that I need to have my first in the hospital to see how it goes. And that's what we ended up doing. I tried to choose a hospital that had a reputation for being more naturally minded. But honestly, when it came down to it, the cascade of medical intervention was just as strong there as anywhere else. And that's basically what happened to me. My first birth didn't end in a C-section, but it very much was that birth conveyor belt of just intervention where at the first signs of labor, we sprinted to the hospital, which I think was, in hindsight, kind of my number one mistake. We got there and, it was just immediately they stuck an IV in my arm and I was on the clock, basically. I believe I had a high trickle of my water breaking. So to them, it was like, well, your water's broken. So you basically have 24 hours to give birth. Otherwise, we're going to be breathing down your neck. And that's what happened. I got into the hospital. My body just totally clamped up. Like there was not one drop of oxytocin in my bloodstream because the nurses there were just so intense. The doctors that were on call just really they had me freaked out. But I was able to have a vaginal birth with my first. I ended up caving and getting an epidural, which I really didn't want to do. And I just remember thinking, wow, this epidural has brought me so much relief. And it just wasn't a part of my plan, but it was shocking how much I was able to relax after getting that epidural. And so it kind of just solidified a belief in me that, yeah, I can't do labor naturally. And the epidural was great and it let me rest and it let me progress. And so I kind of had that belief in my head going into my second birth here. And what I found was that's not true. And I am a lot stronger than I thought I was. And I do just want to say for anybody listening, I feel like my story specifically will resonate with people with women that are really afraid of the fear of childbirth, because I was the biggest scaredy cat you've ever met. I mean, I don't like getting an IV. I hate to get my belly button pierced. Like, I'm terrified of pain. So if my story is for anyone, it's for women out there that are afraid of the pain of childbirth, because if I could do it, I promise you can do it too.
Wow. Allie, that is such a great topic because it is so common. It is such a common fear of like, I don't think I have the stuff. Like, sure, I'd love to give birth at home, but I don't know if I can cope. I don't know if that's something that I can do. And so I love that that's going to be a topic that we kind of see shine through your story. Yeah, because it is so common.
Yeah.
And birth really is, for many people, one of the first times that we kind of see what we're made of, like kind of see like, yeah, do I have it? Do I really have it?
Yeah, totally. I kind of was just always under the impression that, like, I'm not the type of woman that can give birth naturally. I'm not the type of woman that can give birth at home. And I know we're doing this whole homesteading thing. And I remember looking at other people on the internet like, oh, well, she can do it because she's a homesteader. And, or, she can do it because she's a redhead and redheads have a higher pain tolerance. Like, I was always giving people an excuse in my mind. I guess that's imposter syndrome, like, they can do it, but there's no way I could ever do it. And I just want to
Wow.
encourage women listening that, like, you absolutely can do it. If fear is one of the number one things holding you back, just figure out how to get past that. And honestly, listening to positive birth stories are so helpful in that arena.
I love that. Oh my goodness, so good. Yep. And that's like a huge aspect in terms of like childbirth education from my perspective. Like I know in my course, that is one of the biggest things that we focus on is, okay, what do we do about fear? Like, let's get to the root of fear and let's figure out how to not just kind of cover it up, but genuinely heal these concerns so that we can then go on to enjoy the experience. So,
Absolutely.
I think the psychology behind that too, Allie, of just the idea of like, oh, well, they can do it because of this, but that means I can't do it. Oh, it's so fascinating and so relatable.
Yes, absolutely. And just here at the top, I want to say I gave birth 2 months ago to an 11-pound baby. And I was completely shocked when they weighed him and told me he was 11 pounds, because it was very doable. like, yeah,
Wow.
I've never heard of an 11-pound baby. He was
Yeah,
big.
it's big.
So
What was your first? How much did your first weigh?
she was also pretty big, which I didn't even realize, but she was 8 pounds, 8 ounces. And I guess that's
Okay.
considered kind of big for
Sure.
a baby.
Yeah, that's okay. But 6 to 11, it's different.
Yeah.
Wow.
Totally. And like I
Wow.
said, I was shocked when they weighed him and told me he was 11 pounds, because it didn't necessarily feel like an 11-pound baby coming out of me.
Right. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you had this experience in the hospital. You feel like it was kind of the typical, they just, you were admitted and then you were on the clock, you're doing the things that they're having you do. And then, what was your postpartum experience after having had that story?
Well, it's so interesting because now with my home birth postpartum experience, I can really look back and see, just how affected I was by all those interventions that I experienced in the hospital and how that really impacted my postpartum experience. So, like I said, my first baby was, way smaller. And you would imagine that my postpartum experience and my healing experience would have been easier with my first, but that just wasn't what happened with my first. Postpartum was a lot more intense emotionally. And I don't know, I guess I attribute that to getting an epidural is, no small thing. That's kind of an intense procedure that happens. And, I just think a lot of my struggles postpartum were because of, getting an epidural and just being in a hospital surrounded by people that were just so not gentle, not family centered in any way. I mean, they were just trying to like clock in, clock out, get through the day, which like I completely understand. It's a job for them and they're just inundated and overworked, really.
Mhm.
So that experience, and I just feel like during pregnancy, during labor, postpartum, you're so sensitive to people's energies.
Oh, yeah.
And so that had a big impact on me. So yeah, postpartum with my first was intense in kind of a negative way, and postpartum with my second, after a beautiful supportive home birth, was intense in a wonderful way.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
man, that's so beautiful to hear that comparison, and I can't wait to hear in what ways with your second one it's been so wonderfully intense. Um, but okay, so you give birth, you have this postpartum experience that's not ideal. What changed in your family? It sounds like you moved. Is that true? You were
Yes.
suburbs, now you're somewhere else. What was that like, and when did that happen?
Yeah, so that we have been on our farm here for about 2 years. So we moved out to the country, basically giving up the suburbs when my firstborn was about 6 months old. And we just took a deep dive into growing our own food. And when I moved out here, shortly after we moved, I became pregnant. And I was still kind of like, oh my gosh, I want to have a home birth so bad. I want to do it naturally this time, but I'm still just so scared. I'm so scared of the pain. And I'm remembering how much relief I felt getting that epidural in my first labor. So we came out here and I found an OB, and I started going to just, your run of the mill prenatals. I tried to keep them at a minimum because just from right off the bat, it was like, oh, wow, this is exactly like it was with my first, just very sterile. The come in for your prenatal, it's borderline pointless. They barely ask you any questions. You barely have any time to ask questions yourself. And yeah, but I was still scared. So I stuck with the OB practice almost for the entirety of my second pregnancy until I made the switch to midwife care. And I made that switch because it's kind of crazy. Like in the back of my mind, with my second here 2 months ago, I was like, I'm just gonna have a free birth. Like I'm going to low key just not go to the hospital, And I would kind of tell my mom that, and she's like, that sounds kind of crazy. Like, let me, please
Love
let
it.
me help you find a midwife. And so I found a midwife. She's actually a family friend. She was amazing. And yeah, it's probably for the best I didn't have a free birth, but honestly, like, I feel like women are more capable than people give them credit for. And the free birth community is amazing. But that also kind of goes hand in hand with something I wanted to talk about, which is like the generational differences, I think, between women my age who are starting their families. I think a lot of our village and a lot of the support people we have to look to for, everything surrounding birth, it's just, they come from a generation, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where I think just doctors and the medical industry as a whole was so much more respected, and it was such a huge authority in people's lives.
Mhm.
So I had women very much in my life telling me, that's crazy, like you should not do a home birth, that's so dangerous, you need to be with a doctor, you need to be in a hospital. And I don't know if there's ever been in the history of childbirth such a disparity in like younger women like me wanting to have a natural home birth, and the older women in our lives just being like, that's crazy. Don't do that.
Mhm.
And I just find that really unsupportive. And it's, no fault of these women who are just, you know, sharing their experiences. But I was so craving people that kind of understood where I was coming from. And I was craving positive birth stories. And that's why, like, people like you and your podcast are so important, because it's these positive stories that really, I think, get so many women through those
Mhm.
9 months.
Oh man, I love hearing that, even though I wish it weren't true. Like, I wish that we didn't have the issue, but I do like to think of it as like a bridge that won't always be needed. My desire is for, by the time our kids are old enough to give birth, they're so confident because they're surrounded by women who have done it and who are like, yes, you absolutely can do it. So it's like for our age group, for a while, yes, we do need positive birth stories, these platforms, educational resources. And I'm sure that it's not like that will ever just fizzle out completely, but I would love to see it become pretty obsolete, just because it's like, oh, this is what we do. Like, this is what my mom did. This is what my aunt did. And they have instilled in me that I can do it too. And I feel so comfortable and confident in what I know my body can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I'm so excited to come on this podcast today, because I feel like I'm just doing my teeny tiny little part of kind of carrying the torch forward, generationally speaking,
Yeah.
to, like you said, to the point where one day my daughter isn't just crippled by fear and by these, scary stories that certain generations love to tell you when you're like 8 months pregnant. It's like,
It's the
please.
perfect time.
Yeah, it's like I'm only accepting positive stories right now.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So up until the very end, you're seeing an OB, while low key thinking maybe you'll just stay home. Also, I'm curious, did your husband know that that was like something you were like toying with in the back of your mind?
That's such a funny question. It's funny that you ask that, because my husband was kind of like, "So what's your plan?" I was like, "Well, like, would it be crazy to just like stay home until the baby like came out?" And he was like, yeah, that's a little crazy, but like I could get behind it."
Mhm.
And which I was like, "Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that support." But when he started hearing kind of us talking about a midwife, he's like, "Oh, that's what I want. Yeah, I want like a midwife to come, like a professional to be here." So I was like, "Okay, like that's what he wants." Like,
Okay,
okay,
cool.
fine.
So you make that transition from your OB to the midwife. How far along did you say you were?
Oh my gosh, I think when I finally just kind of like ghosted my OB, I was like 38 weeks.
Oh,
Like, yeah, they were probably like, "What happened to her? Where did she go?" And funnily enough, they never followed up or like
yeah.
asked,
Yeah.
like, what happened.
They may have just been like, whatever. Like,
It was like crazy. I was like, "Do you guys care about me at all?" Like,
exactly. It is kind of wild. And I mean, yeah, sure, I know that they've got a lot going on, but it is wild of like, it's fine. Like, you didn't have to say anything. You didn't have to do anything. And that
yeah,
was
I was like,
that.
I was so worried about like, oh, how am I going to break up with them? And I kind of just like stopped going to my appointments, and they never reached out. And I was like, okay, well,
I guess
not a
that's how.
problem, I guess.
Gosh. Oh my goodness. Well, what was that like then when you started seeing your midwife, that difference in care? And this is somebody that's a family friend, you said?
Yes. So she has been a practicing midwife for like something crazy, like 40 years here in
Wow.
Georgia. And I mean, it couldn't have been any more of a stark difference. I mean, she's all about family centered care, and that is so abundantly obvious. When I would go to my prenatals in her office, it was like my mom could come, my brother was there once. Like,
Aw.
yeah, she gets the whole family involved. My daughter was always more than welcome. She has like little toddler toys in her office for the little ones to play with. My husband's already just automatically very involved in all my pregnancies, and she just was so happy to have him along, and he was able to ask questions, because I mean, home birth was, it's something that I'm very like interested in, and I've watched probably every single home birth vlog on YouTube, but like it was very much new to us. So
Mhm.
we definitely had a lot of questions about how it all worked during the appointments, and just family centered care with a midwife is absolutely the way to go.
Yeah.
It's so much better than your traditional OB.
Wow. Oh man, that's beautiful. So, as you are ramping up to give birth, with having seen your midwife, how were you feeling? Like, were you still kind of like, I don't know if I can do this, or were you getting more like, okay, this is actually pretty exciting?
That is such a good question because everybody along the way kind of told me, yeah, you might be afraid right now, but trust me, like when the day comes, when you get closer, you're going to feel so much more confident and prepared. And I was just waiting and waiting and waiting for the fear to subside and be replaced with calm excitement. And that like never happened. I was scared the entire time. And I was even more scared now that I had committed to a home birth. Like
Mhm.
I paid her. So in my mind, there's like no backing out. I already invested the money.
We're doing it.
Yeah. And so I never really got less scared. And then during the last couple of weeks of my pregnancy, I made sure to get my daily walk in. And during my daily walk, I listened to a book called Mindful Hypnobirthing. That was just really helpful to try to get in the right headspace of labor and how to cope with the sensations of labor. And then I also listened to Home Birth on Your Own Terms by Heather Baker, which is just, basically a huge overview about everything physiological birth. So those are kind of the two books that I listened to leading up to birth, and that was really helpful. But yeah, I would say I never really got that like clarity that people talk about. I never got the confidence towards the end of pregnancy that made me feel not scared. I was
Mhm.
scared all the way up until he came out. but I did it scared, which is
Yeah.
the important part.
Yes. Also, it'll be interesting to like kind of discuss later of like, has that changed? Like, if you're ready for another, like,
Yeah.
what's that like? Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay. So 38 weeks is when you like make the official switch in terms of you are not seeing your OB anymore. What was the end of that pregnancy like beyond the fact that you were still scared?
Yeah. So he was 11 pounds in there.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's big baby. And at my OB, I got a couple of ultrasounds and they were telling me like this baby's really big. He's measuring way ahead. And the whole time I was like, they're wrong about that all the time. Like it's so ridiculous. I would never, base any of my decisions off of that. I feel like I should call them and be like, you guys were actually right.
I'm gonna give you that.
I know they can be wrong about that, but in my case, they were right.
Mhm.
But I am glad I didn't change any of my plans, based on the fact that I was having a big baby, because turns out I can give birth to very large babies.
Mhm.
So the end of pregnancy was intense in the fact that I just was so big and uncomfortable. And I felt so much pressure on my cervix. And I just remember thinking, I really hope this intense pressure I'm feeling is doing something and that I'm silently dilating down there to a certain extent so that my labor is shorter.
Mhm.
And I think that did end up being the case, which was amazing.
Yeah, that is great. Okay, so big baby. And how far along were you when you actually went into labor?
Yeah. So I was 40 weeks and 2 days.
Okay. Okay. So really truly like that even makes it more clear of just like how short this period of time was that you had decided, yeah, we're doing this. We're doing
Yeah.
this at home.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of always preparing to have an unmedicated labor, even if it was going to be in the hospital.
Right.
But you're right. Like those last couple weeks where I had committed to a home birth were kind of like, all right, we're doing this. And I was just like, it's going to be great.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so 40 and 2. So what were the symptoms like leading up to actually going into labor?
Yeah. So just sitting around waiting for physiological labor to start is such an amazing experience.
Mm.
You basically just have to sit and wait. And in my experience, it was that. I mean, there was a lot of pressure, like I said, on my cervix for honestly like 3 weeks leading up to labor. I just felt so much pressure. And, that 40-week mark hit. And of course, at the end of pregnancy, you're kind of just like, okay, like labor's going to start like now, right? Like I'm 40 weeks. And your body's like, no, not quite. Like some women go 41 weeks, some women go 42 weeks. Like it's not a perfect thing like that. So, you know, 40 weeks hit and I was like, okay. And I just stayed trusting that my body would go into labor in its own natural, perfect timing. And that 40 weeks, 2 days hit. And I woke up really early, like 6 a.m. And I just felt, I guess, a tightening sensation. And I was like, oh my gosh, is that a contraction? Like, what is that? With my first, I guess I did feel contractions, but you're always kind of like, was that a contraction? I don't know. It seems very unclear. And this is only my second baby. So it all felt very unclear to me. But surely enough, I was able to go back to sleep, which is astonishing. And I woke up and there were more of these sensations of a tightening feeling. And they were coming in a regular pattern. And so I told my husband, I think labor has begun. And it was this very like ominous tone. And he was like, okay, like, aren't we excited? And I was like, I wish I was excited.
Spooky.
Yeah, it felt very like spooky and like a monster was coming. But no, it was just my perfect, beautiful baby. So yeah, that's how labor started. And the contractions they started coming. And in the beginning of labor, like once I started moving around for the day, like the contractions were coming, I immediately started like vocalizing through them loudly, like breathing, kind of bracing myself against like the kitchen counter. And I remember, maybe 2 hours into this, my husband was like, maybe you should try to go through them like a little bit quiet. And I was like, how dare you say that to me? What do you know? Like, are you telling me to be quiet? But it's funny because I tried to be a little bit quieter after that. And I realized that this like loud vocalizations that I thought was really helping me manage the contractions were kind of triggering my mind into believing, whoa, these really hurt. And I think that like whole tension pain cycle where like if you believe that something really hurts, you experience that sensation as painful. And so when I kind of chilled out on the loud vocalizations, they became more manageable. And I was like,
Wow.
well, thank you, hon. That was actually really amazing advice because this just got more manageable, which is great.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
I love that connection to like the fear, tension, pain.
Yes.
But yeah, just like, okay, wait a minute. What if it's not? Like, what if I try something different and see how that works? And also, good on you for trying it
Yeah.
because it could be so easy in the moment to be like, no, also, goodbye. Like, I'm busy, like it could be so easy.
So
But
easy.
to actually listen and be like, okay, huh,
Yeah.
I'll try it. And then
Exactly.
to see like, oh yeah, that actually really helped. Thank you. That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's so true. I mean, there were many humbling moments I feel like throughout my labor where like I had to kind of stop and listen to the advice of my husband or the midwives. It actually really helped. So I'm in early labor. I'm trying to manage the contractions now a little bit more calmly and intentionally. I'm walking around my farm. I'm bracing against trees out in the yard. Like this is already just such a redemptive, more beautiful, peaceful experience than with my first. And yeah, I'm kind of just managing my contractions just in the middle of the day outside. I remember this was 2 months ago. So it was hot outside, but my mom's there with me because she's taking care of my toddler. My husband's inside wrapping some things up with work. And these contractions just gradually get more intense, but I'm handling it and it's all going great. And then at a certain point, they're getting more and more intense. And I remember trying desperately to remember, okay, what did I learn in this mindful hypnobirthing book? Like, what are the techniques that I learned? And I felt very much like every time I was trying to think of the techniques, another contraction would come and I would have to focus on that. And so my advice to anybody listening is maybe write down the techniques that you've learned throughout pregnancy so that you can reference something when you really start to get into labor. Because it just felt kind of like, oh, I need to think about what the techniques are, but wait, I got to get through this contraction. And it was funny because I remembered that one of the techniques I had heard about was smelling like essential oils or smelling something strong when a contraction is coming, because your mind will kind of focus more on the smell. And I'm in like such this crunchy era that like nothing in my house is scented because that like normally gives me a headache. And so I'm like kind of walking around my house like there's got to be something with a scent in here. Like I don't have any essential oils, nothing. And so I get toothpaste and I put it in a little Ziploc baggie because that's like the only thing I can find. And honestly, like that minty, refreshing smell, I would smell that during a contraction and it really helped. So the whole like smelling something when a contraction is coming, very helpful, I found. And they are getting more intense. And in hindsight, I know that they are getting more intense because I was approaching transition. And I mean, this was a relatively quick process. This was like, 6 hours from the first little twinge that I felt early that morning. And yeah, the contractions just really get intense, but still manageable. And we moved to the bedroom and the lights are low. And my husband's really helping me through these contractions with counter pressure. And I guess I'll just mention counter pressure is so helpful during these big contractions. I feel like in my next labor, I almost want to like not rely so heavily on counter pressure because I did find myself being like, hun, hurry, hurry. Like I like couldn't live without the counter pressure. And it's like, that's maybe not so great because my husband had to be over here for a second. And I'm like desperate.
Fair, but you had an 11-pound baby. So
True.
I feel like kind of reasonable.
Exactly. Like if anybody needed the counter pressure, maybe it was me coping with the
Yeah.
11-pound baby.
Yes.
But yes, counter pressure, smelling a strong scent, these were all things that were getting me through the contractions. And at a certain point, I will admit, I was like, wow, if this is how the rest of this experience is going to go, I don't think I can do it. But that period where it felt almost too intense, that was transition. And that was me reaching 10 centimeters. And so by the time my midwife team arrived, they checked me and I was complete.
Oh, wow.
I was so relieved to hear that because in my first birth, it was like they would check me and I hadn't done anything. And maybe I had even clamped up some and like gone backwards. So my husband and I were both so excited to hear that I was at 10 centimeters after only like 6 hours of contractions.
Mm.
And the intensity lifted after I went through transition and got to 10 centimeters. And the contractions were still intense. But for somebody with like zero pain tolerance, I was managing them just fine and I was getting through it. And I just labored to the best of my ability, like on the ground on all fours, like experimenting with different vocalizations and figuring out what focused my energy down to my baby. And just I labored him down for probably 4 hours in the privacy and comfort of my bedroom and of our bathroom, and just moving between these spaces in ways that felt intuitive to me and with people that respected me and allowed me to just do my thing while quietly just kind of being in the background. And my midwife team they were so amazing. When I would get to a point in my labor where I felt like, okay, like I feel stuck. I don't know what to do. somebody from my midwife team, there were two midwives and a doula. One of them would approach me and gently suggest something. And I would be like, okay, that sounds horrible. Like they wanted me to sit on the toilet, the dilation station, and do a couple contractions there. And I was like, that sounds very painful. And I don't want to do that. But I got up and I went to that toilet and I sat down and I had some very intense contractions there. And that progressed my labor. So there were many moments where they suggested something. I said, that sounds horrific. I don't want to do that. I did it anyways. And that progressed my labor. So I think that's a testament to, as much as I wanted a free birth, I was so thankful to have professionals there that did this sort of thing on a weekly basis. And they just kind of knew what was going to get me through. And yeah, so like I said, about 4 hours passed, and it got to the point where I was curious why my water hadn't broken. And so my midwife just gently reached inside and broke it for me. And I remember being like, did you break my water? And she said, yes. And I said, and then what happened? And she said, well, a little bit of water came out. And I was like, I was expecting some sort of huge gush of water, but it wasn't that crazy. There was just a little bit of water that came out. And then things kind of got a little bit more intense. I could really feel that my baby was just getting closer. And so instinctively sort of just climbed into the bed. And my husband had just built us this like king size bed connected to a little twin size bed. And he like did the whole thing in wood. Like this bed is so big, it has its own zip code. And it's like a big family co-sleeping bed. So I climbed up in this big bed that my husband had just built for us, and I held onto the headboard. And I remember thinking in my mind, this headboard better be sturdy as a rock. And of course, I grabbed onto the headboard and I did like 2 pushes, and I felt the ring of fire for like a split second. And that was something that I like stayed up late fretting over. The ring of fire was going to be so painful and it was going to be the worst. It was not bad at all. It was only a couple of seconds of extreme intensity, and then it was over. And then my baby came out and he just slid right out. He had a nuchal hand next to his face. So it's like 11 pounds plus a little hand. So it's like, good Lord. But it was fine. Like I had a tiny little tear that I didn't even opt to have stitched, and that's healed beautifully. And then my baby was born, and we didn't know the gender, and I felt his anatomy and I felt that he was a little boy. And yeah, that's the story of my 11-pound baby born at home as somebody who is terrified of pain.
Who slid right out. We need to go back and talk about this more. like slid right out. Like was this like contraction head, next contraction body, or was it like all at once? How did this baby come out with this nuchal hand?
Yeah, so it was like you said at first. It was contraction,
Okay.
head plus hand.
Head and hand.
And I waited, a minute, 30 seconds for that next contraction. And just, I pushed him out. I do remember, I guess, kind of towards the end of my labor, I was letting that fear of pain really kind of hold me back from really accepting the fact that I was about to have to push this baby out. So I got myself into like certain positions where like my butt was like higher than my head, and had a couple contractions there. And I remember my midwife being like, you're going to have to like get into a different position and let gravity kind of help you out here, because the baby's not really going to come out like that probably. And I think that was just my mind subconsciously being like, I don't want to push the baby out. Like, I don't want to do that at all. And I think that's just, you have to have a certain level of surrendering to the fear. And, there's an adorable little baby on the other side. And I finally listened to everybody in the room, and they said, you got to push like you mean it. And so I just girded up my loins and pushed like I meant it. And yeah, in 2 contractions, he came out. And
Wow.
the ring of fire, again, for any of you ladies out there listening, it is not that bad. or at least it wasn't in my experience. It was very short, and I would take the ring of fire over some of those transitional contractions any day.
Actually, I'm curious about that. So you said that you had transition and that was intense. Then your midwives got there, you were complete. But then you said you labored your baby down. That was for 4 hours. So you were
Yeah.
complete for like 4 hours before you actually started the pushing
Yes.
process.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is like such a good thing to highlight right there, because with my first, I got to 10 centimeters, and like they do very commonly in hospitals, you get to 10 centimeters and they're like, all right, let's push the baby out.
Mhm.
And for
Yep.
me, not knowing it, it sounds great. And I pushed for like 2 hours with my
Mhm.
first. And that's something that, like, I don't know, I just didn't even really realize that, like, laboring your baby down, deep into your, I guess, birth canal
Mhm.
makes the whole pushing thing so much more enjoyable and manageable and shorter and less painful and less exhausting. So, yeah, read about laboring your baby down and really like set that intention in your birth, because it makes all the difference in the world.
I think that's such a great point too, especially now knowing, because you didn't know then, but knowing now, like, okay, you did have a big old baby that
Mhm.
needed to come down, and a baby with a hand that could have been not so grand
Mhm.
if you had been the one like manufacturing the pushing to get him out.
Yeah,
But waiting for him to actually be down low and ready to come out probably made a really big difference.
I think so too. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So this big boy's born. And what did it feel like, especially, comparing to your previous experience, epidural birth in the hospital with not super duper friendly people around you? Like, what did this feel like?
Oh my gosh, it felt just so euphoric. It felt different. I wasn't epiduralized, so I was very much in my body, and I think I had a little bit more. I don't know. I felt just kind of shocky after pushing the baby out. I mean, like I said, he's 11 pounds, so like I just felt a little bit in shock that I just did that. That I just successfully had a home birth. I guess my body knew, like, that's a big baby that you just pushed out. So I was a little bit shaky afterwards, but nothing like a little bit of juice and a snack couldn't take care of very quickly. And yeah, everybody in the room was just like me, so interested in birth. And I remember feeling very much like, oh, I want to get the placenta out, like, now. And they were kind of like, okay, like, just, relax a little bit. Like, the placenta will come just like the baby came in its own perfect timing. And I was like, okay. But I felt like, I want to be done with all of it.
Mhm.
And just shortly thereafter, the placenta came out. And along with the fear of pain, I was very afraid of postpartum hemorrhage. Like, that's always been something that's very scary to me. And, that's kind of the time when something like that would happen, when the placenta is coming out. And, especially if you're in a hospital where they want to like pull on the placenta or do crazy things to like get it out before it's ready. But that was not the case with a home birth. They're very much allowing the physiological process to unfold for the placenta. And I birthed the placenta, and I just love midwives. Like, we all gathered around the placenta and they examined it and they showed me, the cord, and they showed me how the placenta works. And my mom and my toddler came in kind of around that point, and it was a very educational experience for somebody like my mom, who had all hospital births, but she did have an unmedicated birth with me. So that was kind of like, the heritage in our family of like having unmedicated births. Like, I got that strength in large part from my mother, who did it with me. And then she was able to be there for my unmedicated birth. And she was even able to examine the placenta, which is something
Oh,
that she was interested in and something that they would never in a million years do kind of in a hospital setting. Maybe unless you asked, of course. So yeah, the vibes after delivering him were so wonderful.
wow. That really is just incredible and such a stark difference from that previous experience. And you had already mentioned, your postpartum was very different and is currently being written very differently. And I'd love to hear more of what that's looked like.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The postpartum experience. I also think I've been breastfeeding my toddler who's 2.5. I breastfed that baby throughout this entire pregnancy.
Mhm.
And, there might be something to say about maybe my hormones were a little bit more regulated because I never stopped breastfeeding and then had to like wait for my milk to come in. Like the milk was already flowing when my baby was born and he latched on immediately and I had my toddler latched onto the other side. So there might be a lot to say for that continued breastfeeding where I didn't have the stress of like, oh, is my baby, latching properly? Is my baby getting food? I have to wait for my milk to come in. Is she getting enough colostrum? Because I remember that being very much a concern with my first, and that just wasn't the case with my second. But honestly, I think the biggest thing is being in the comfort and safety of your own home and not having to like change rooms to go to some sort of postpartum suite in the hospital. I was in my own bed and I was able to snuggle up with my family and take a shower in my own shower and eat my own food in my refrigerator and just have my family with me, and it just felt good having the expertise of midwives there in my home with me who did the postpartum checkup on my baby and on me. And when we were all good and everything looked fine, they left. And it was just my little family in our home with our new little baby. And like, yeah, we just need to bring that birth experience back to families, back in the home, because I think it does so much good for new moms entering motherhood. Um, and I just would love to encourage new moms with their first babies that you don't have to have the negative experience. I think that fuels so many people into this home birth journey that you can do it with your first. I know it's a harder thing to go into this great unknown of home birth with your first baby, but I would encourage women that yes, it's scary, but you can do scary things while being afraid, like I did. Um, so yeah.
And I think that the other way, like the flip side of looking at it would be, well, if it's your first birth, it's already completely unknown. It's completely unknown. You've never done it before. It's unknown.
Yeah.
So, okay. So a home birth is unknown as well, but a hospital birth is unknown. So let's pick this one. If,
So true. It's so true. And I feel like, I don't know, listening to the scary stories that people like to talk about
Mhm.
when you're pregnant, with your first, and you're so susceptible to people's stories about what could happen. It's like bad things happen in the hospital all the time. And
Yeah.
so many people try to paint having a home birth as like negligent, but negligence can happen in the hospital and does very often happen in the hospital. And it's like for some reason it happening in the hospital is like excusable, but it's not at
Right.
all.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, Allie, this has been such a beautiful story. I have loved hearing your experience. And you've had so many insightful little pieces of wisdom here. So I'm curious, as we wrap up, is there anything left that you would like to share or say, a piece of encouragement or wisdom as we close up?
As intense as an 11-pound baby with no medicine at home was, I would do it again a million times
Mm.
over going back into the hospital setting. And, I did not have this quiet, peaceful, just sort of blissful labor like I feel like I've seen on social media. And like I wanted. I wanted to have this beautiful, blissful, euphoric, like orgasmic birth. And it was intense. And there were elements of pain associated with my labor. But I just feel like the more I kind of do this, and with my next baby, it's going to be even better. Listening to positive birth stories on podcasts like yours, it just does so much good for your preparation and doing it yourself. And yeah, surrounding yourself with uplifting stories, and even stories like mine where it's okay to be really afraid of the
Mhm.
pain of childbirth. In hindsight, it was intense, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't handle. And I
Mhm.
promise it's not something you can't handle. We are genuinely made to birth our babies. And yeah, I would just encourage any woman out there listening that if I can give birth to an 11-pound baby at home, as scared as I am of anything painful, I promise you can too. And it's
Mhm.
through listening to stories on podcasts like this that you will get the courage to do it. Even if you feel absolutely terrified, like I did, leading up to labor, during labor, and the moment before you push your baby out, I promise you can still do it.
Mm, yep. And then you're on the other side with the knowledge that you've done it, and you can't unknow that. You've already done it. It's done. You did it.
Oh my
How
gosh,
amazing.
nobody will be able to tell me anything for my
Mhm.
next birth. Like,
Mhm.
I am going to be like unstoppable. And yeah, it's going to be even better than it was with my second.
Oh, amazing. Allie, this has been such an incredible story. Thank you so much. It was such an honor to have you on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon.
How cool was that? As we move into today's episode roundup, there are a few themes from Allie's story that really stood out to me. First, fear does not always have to disappear completely before you move forward. I think so many women are waiting for confidence to arrive before they commit to home birth, before they choose to trust their bodies, before they step into labor. But Allie's story is an example of leading with courage, not confidence. She didn't feel confident, but boy, did she prove to be courageous. Allie admitted that she remained afraid throughout her pregnancy. She didn't suddenly wake up at 39 weeks feeling fearless. She simply took the next step again and again. And that fear is actually one of the reasons I created Whole Mother Home Birth, because fear is one of the most common concerns I hear from women preparing for birth. Not necessarily fear of home birth itself, but fear that they won't be able to cope, that labor will be too intense. They have a fear that they won't actually have what it takes. So, inside of my course, we spend a significant amount of time addressing fear, the nervous system, regulation, mindset, relaxation techniques, and practical tools to help women prepare mentally and emotionally for labor. Podcast listeners get a 10% discount when they use the code podcast at checkout. And the link is in the show notes, or you can go to myhappyhomebirth.com and click home birth course. Okay, next. I loved hearing the contrast between intervention heavy care and family centered care. One of the most striking parts of Allie's story wasn't even labor itself, it was the difference in how she felt. The difference between being on the clock and being supported, between feeling managed versus being cared for, and being a patient versus being a mother. Birth is physiological, but good golly, is it also deeply emotional? The environment, the people surrounding us, the sense of safety and support, it all very much matters. And Allie's experience highlights that beautifully. And finally, can we talk about that 11-pound baby with the nuchal hand? Woof, I think that that's going to be the headline everyone remembers. But I hope that you will take away even more than the fact that Allie birthed an 11-pound baby at home. Through the process, she realized she was designed to do more than she believed that she could. For so long, she had been telling herself, other women can do this, but not me. But then she did it. She kept moving forward despite her own fears, and she reached the other side with a whole new perspective of herself and her body. Is that you? Are you on the before side, wondering if you can actually pull it off? You don't have to be completely fearless. You can still be courageous and keep moving forward. Okay, my friends, that's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week.